The deportation of hundreds of Iraqis is delayed. We will have a special report on one family's plight. Also coming up, an expensive campaign is shaping up for the Michigan governor's race. Also, despite new incentives, a huge company picks another Midwest state to invest in, but Michigan may not lose out entirely. And the movie Detroit expands the conversation about the 1967 rebellion. MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015. It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, Craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hi there, and welcome to MiWeek. So glad that you could join us. I'm Christy McDonald. We have a lot to get to on the show, so coming up for you, the Iraqi nationals detained during an immigration sweep will remain in this country a little while longer. We'll talk about the latest ruling and hear from one of the detainees. Plus, a look at the top candidates in the 2018 Michigan governor's race and the major fundraising that is already taking place. Also coming up, Michigan may not have won the big Foxconn investment, but incentives might help for a secondary plant. And the movie Detroit has people talking. How will it impact Detroit's reputation and the conversation about race relations? Let's bring in our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, you know him, and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Guys, it's great to see you. We have a lot going on today. There's a lot percolating also in Washington with the healthcare debate coming up in the most bizarre. I feel like I've had to reread some of the rules and regulations of the Senate and the entire process here. You guys are speechless, huh?
Yeah.
Whenever you want to get to it.
They cannot get their act together over this stuff.
I know, it's kind of interesting. All right, well, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff tonight, but we are going to start with the latest on the impending deportation of hundreds of Iraqi immigrants in Metro Detroit and across the country. All have criminal records and were detained by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement back in June. But this week, a federal judge in Detroit temporarily blocked the deportation, giving the Iraqis 90 days to find lawyers to help them possibly stay in this country. Many of the Iraqis are Christian and would face persecution in Iraq. Tonight, in a special One Detroit report, we hear from Yanni Daoud, who is being detained in Youngstown, Ohio, and a visit with his family in Warren. Take a look.
This call is from a correction facility and is subject to monitoring and recording.
So how are you doing today?
Yeah, it's up and down. Today I feel good. But, you know, it's a roller coaster. You know, it's an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
You know, we're basically on death row. You know, that's how we all feel.
I feel like he's been kidnapped. You know, I just want him to come home.
Did you hear anything else today?
No, not really. Not really.
Yeah. My husband was driving home from the gas station and was pulled over by ICE and arrested. They said his supervision was revoked.
I can't wait till you come home.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait. It's been long enough.
45 days.
He's in Youngstown, Ohio, 4-hour drive. So we can't see him, you know, once every couple weeks.
Not knowing is the worst part. The not knowing. It's just, I'm seeing grown men stronger than me just deteriorating. You know, sobbing like little babies.
I just want people to know that he's not a bad guy. He made a mistake.
He's a very likable person.
He made a mistake, you know, a long time ago, a non-violent crime. He paid his dues. He did jail time for it. Everything was taken care of. He hasn't gotten in any trouble since.
Was it a serious crime?
It was drugs. It was marijuana.
We hold prayer circles every day, every night.
We're very religious. He says God is the only one that's going to get us through this.
And it has always.
Many families are suffering. I'm one of the fortunate ones, actually, because you have a job. Many men are losing their houses. You know, their families have to go on welfare.
We were all Trump supporters. We all supported Trump. My father supported Trump. And, you know, he vowed to protect these people. And yet he sent, the Christians. And he's sending all these people back. And it's just true betrayal.
I don't even want to vote again.
I'm really disappointed in the president. Doesn't he have any feelings for people? I mean, if he cares about people, how could you do this?
I'm American at heart, and I'll always be. I've been in this country for 35 years, and many men have been here longer.
My husband asked one of the agents, when is this going to be over? And the agent said, when they send you back.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
That's just one family story, and we will continue to follow the Dawood story. Check MiWeek.org for updates. Now, turning now to the Michigan governor's race. Even though the election is more than a year away, and Stephen and Nolan never want to talk about things that are that far away, some of the candidates already have more than $1 million in their campaign war chests, and that includes Democrats Gretchen Whitmer, Sri Tanador, and Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. On the Republican side, two undeclared candidates are leading in fundraising, Attorney General Bill Schuette and Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley. But will money make a difference in this race? All right, so the last time we talked, Mark Bernstein was still in the race. He has since bowed out and said after thinking a lot about it, he is not going to be running for the Democrat side and put his support behind Gretchen Whitmer. What kind of change does that make now for the Democrats? And Nolan, you wrote a column saying, well, Democrats seem to have landed on this is Whitmer's what they've got.
Yeah, I don't see anybody else. Nobody can think of another name who might come up. What's interesting on that side is I don't think I've ever seen two what you would consider unknown candidates or minor candidates come up with that sort of money, this sort of resources this early. You wouldn't think they could make a strong challenge just based on the fact that nobody's much heard of them. But money goes a long way in building name recognition. I'll be interested to see how they use those funds and what sort of difference they make in this race.
How could they use those funds for I mean, but you would have to be, what, $8 million campaign to put your name on every billboard around the state of Michigan repeatedly?
That would cost, but, I mean, money is exposure, it's opportunity, especially this early. And if you look at a candidate like Abdul El-Sayed, who I think is one of the more interesting candidates for a lot of reasons, but was made more interesting by the fact that he was able to raise this much money. I mean, this is somebody who's not been in the race that long, has been really working hard to get his name out there, and apparently people are responding. That money helps you do that, you know, and build on that name recognition. I wouldn't be surprised, given what I know about him, if the field doesn't change. If he were to give Gretchen a real run.
The Bernie people apparently love him and are building support behind him.
He's a really smart guy.
That's become a very important wing of the Democratic Party. Now the other fellow, Tanador.
Sri Tanador, he put in $3 million of his own money into his campaign.
No other candidate on either side has that kind of a war chest. So, you know, what's he going to do with it? Will it make a difference? I don't know, but I think that primary is going to be perhaps more interesting than we expect, just because of the money being raised by these two, you know, at this point, unknown candidates.
So what can it really, I asked Stephen, you know, what can it really buy you? And you said exposure and, you know.
Well, organization. They can hire, right? You know, they can hire professionals and they can do, you know, what a big campaign does. They can do direct mail, you know, they can get on the television, they can get on radio. On the Republican side, though, we had, I think, an interesting development this past weekend when Pat Kobach, the senator from Canton, got in the race. And, you know, this is a guy the Tea Party loves. He's a true blue conservative, you know, from the far right. I think if he is in, I think that he can pull enough votes away from Bill Schuette to really give Brian Calley a boost if Calley gets in and runs an effective campaign.
And when do you expect to hear from either of those two, from Brian Calley or Bill Schuette? What, I guess, are they waiting for when you see other candidates like this out there and able to raise the kind of money that they are? So
well, I don't think, I've continued to believe that Brian Calley's not waiting for anything. I don't think he's running next year. Nolan, I know you still believe he might.
I think he might. I'm not sure he will.
Yeah. I don't know what you're waiting for at this point. I think you do have to start getting out there and raising money. Look at the head start that some of these folks have.
So what will change, for example, if Schuette announces his candidacy? How will his presence? I mean, he's been running.
He's already out.
So I mean, that would. I think if when he announces, everybody say, "Well, wait a minute. I thought he was running."
I thought you were.
I mean, Calley's a different story because there's still that air of mystery of whether he will or whether he won't. And I think he's got to get in by Labor Day or make some definitive.
And do you think the same? Do you think the same thing for Bill Schuette, that Labor Day is going to be around magic time?
I think he will. Although
That's
for Schuette,
typically when you do it, right?
the Republicans have their biannual convention on Mackinac on the 23rd of September. You don't want to go in there undeclared. If you're going to be a candidate, you've got to declare by that point. That's true of the Senate race too.
Yeah, I also wouldn't assume this Democratic field is set. I mean, I think there are a couple of big names out there who understand the challenge that Gretchen Whitmer would have in the general if she were to get the nomination, and I don't want to see Democrats have spoiled probably the best electoral opportunity they've had in several decades to win the governor.
Well, that kind of lends me.
I still think Gary Peters is somebody who could jump in. I don't know that he has said definitively that he will not do it.
I don't think you give up a Senate seat to run against Bill Schuette.
I don't know
for governor. I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough.
Why would he want to do that?
Well,
when you had someone like Dan Kildee, who arguably has good name recognition and
not as good as Gary Peters.
No, of course.
No, not as good as Gary Peters because he hasn't won a statewide race like that. But if he wouldn't give up something like that, why would Gary Peters give up a Senate seat?
I mean, I think that's something. The executive role has always appealed to Gary. I think he's somebody who's immensely qualified for that role. I think he'd be a strong candidate in that race. I think he would be probably the only person who you can imagine really challenging Schuette, who I think is a really strong candidate for that race in the general.
Well, if he's going to do it, I mean, that's his ambition. This is the year to do it because,
you're not going to wait.
We've talked about this before. In Michigan, one party rarely succeeds itself in the governor's office, and, it would seem to be the Democrats' cycle, their turn.
But they could blow it.
Well, they always can do that. But, if 2008, I believe, is shaping up for a big Democratic year. So
18. Yeah.
18, right, 2018.
And
if he's going to do it, this would be the time.
Not just a party flip, too, but what do you think the key issues are going to be that the Democrats should be concentrating on should they want to take them?
Well, they'll ride Flint incessantly. The failures of this governor in terms of his investment in cities, which ties it to Flint, the inability to get the economy going in a way that everybody feels it. The same things that they were trying to make a big issue in the last election when Mark Schauer was challenging Rick Snyder. I mean, I think this is a governor who's left a pretty wide berth of opportunity for Democrats to say, we could do it different.
But don't you think, Nolan, that maybe the Republicans, if you look at Bill Schuette and Brian Calley, should they both get into it, Brian Calley could say, well, look, I was in Flint then for the next year after that and tried to help with the rebuild, and Bill Schuette saying, I was going back and trying to hold people accountable for what happened.
Yeah, I mean, and that's been the point of all this, I think. But I don't think the Republicans are going to be talking as much about Flint as the Democrats are. I think they'll have those answers you're talking about.
Talk about balancing the budget.
I think if you're Brian Calley, you're talking about, look where we were 8 years ago when this team came in, and look where we are now. He's going to run on the record. Schuette's been so much running away from Snyder. I don't know how he capitalizes on the really strong recovery Michigan has had. So I think he's going to be turning to other issues, and I think, just as Steve said, he'd be talking, or you said he'll be talking about, I was fearless, I went after my own party, I'm not a partisan, you know.
Right. So we didn't talk about the other big name that could pop out of the Democrats, Jeffrey Feiger. Is that a possibility? And it was funny. I was a reporter in Flint when he ran the first time, and I remember the day that he presented his budget, what he think that he could do, and that's kind of when things just started to fall apart a little bit. The wheels fell off the bus.
I don't suspect he's eyeing this race so much as if he's eyeing anything, eyeing 2020. At the national level. I mean, he ran for this once before, sure. In his little commercials now, you see this little Feiger 2020 thing showing up. I mean, he's not. I don't think he's.
Well, you think he run for what?
I think he run for president.
Well,
I think that's what Jeffrey thinks he should be doing, right?
Yeah, but don't you have to take some baby steps before you?
Oh no! Donald Trump didn't take any baby steps.
I would love to see a ballot when you go in next year with Kid Rock and Jeffrey Feiger on it.
I'll tell you what.
That's when you go in and you just start writing big spiral marks on your ballot and saying, "Where are we?"
Just throw it in the trash.
We're living in an alternate universe.
I'm not participating in this anymore.
All right. Well, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch and talk about in the next coming months. Okay. Now to follow up on a story that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Governor Snyder's business incentives package passed in the legislature, but just on Wednesday, the company that those incentives were designed for chose to locate its new $10 billion plant in Wisconsin. It is the first major U.S. factory for Foxconn and has the potential of generating 13,000 jobs. But all may not be lost. Michigan could be in the running for a Foxconn Technology Center. This was a big deal that Michigan was working on, and the governor was trying to work on with that incentives package. And you look at what Wisconsin threw on the table.
What was it, $2-3 billion?
Exactly, and so
you're looking at. We just got outplayed at that game, and that's the lesson, right?
We got out-politicked too. It's locating it in the Paul Ryan's district, and you know. It was a state that Trump loves and a governor Trump loves. I think that first one was all about politics. But there's no way Michigan is going to get in that $2 and $3 billion incentive game, nor should we.
No. But okay, so that's the question. So people are saying, well, if we can't get into it, but shouldn't we be able to be getting into that, or is there sometimes
a return on
incentives
investment
that are so big that it says
it's
making sense?
You know, again. I think that the better strategy is the one that the governor articulated 7 years ago. Make Michigan a better climate for businesses. And the problem, I think, in the sort of intervening 8 years has been that he's focused on one thing and one thing only: taxes. He lowered corporate taxes, but at the same time, you know, we're not funding education the way we should. Our roads and infrastructure are a mess. These are things that businesses look at too, and they want to locate in places where their workers will want to live, where there's workers who can come work for them, who have skills. We got to keep building that kind of place in Michigan.
I don't think in any of those areas Wisconsin's that much better than us. I mean,
they haven't eroded as much as we have, I think.
I talked to the governor yesterday about this. He's very confident that they'll get one of the two pieces left.
And they're looking at what, Romulus? They're looking at Southeast Michigan.
Romulus seems to be the most logical place. I mean, and because you've got an airport with direct flights to Asia. This is an Asian company, but there's two pieces of this left. There's the small screen facility. The governor believes that's most likely for Michigan because those screens will go into automobiles primarily. I mean, that will be their biggest customer. Where else would you want to be? So he was pretty convinced that they were going to get, Michigan was going to get one of the remaining two pieces. The other piece is a manufacturing facility where they put it all together.
So the incentives plan and the package that they were able to get through, then would you say it was successful then?
Well, we won't know until we see whether they do land one of these other two pieces.
But what about for other companies, though? They look and they say, maybe Michigan is getting back into a little bit more of incentives, and maybe it's a better place to look. So if they don't get that, is it good for other companies?
Yeah, I mean, it should be. I mean, that was the idea. I hope it will be, and it's designed for big projects, not every little thing that comes, so they're not going to be throwing them around to everybody. I think the things they've already done in terms of taxes and the regulatory environment help Michigan. It's not like we're not getting any of these projects. We've landed some big things in Michigan, and so I think they'll help. Hope they will.
I'm not a fan of this approach to growing business. I think the governor was right when he ran against this stuff and said when he was elected, he was going to stop. I think it's a longer haul to fix the things that we need to fix, to make this a more hospitable environment for people to, you know, provide jobs and things like that. But that was the right tack, and I would hate to see us sort of get off that road and go back to, well, we can buy jobs, which is really what this is. I mean, you talk about corporate welfare. This is the most obscene kind of it. What Wisconsin is doing is
I don't disagree
really
with that.
Obnoxious.
But in terms, you know, I agree with almost everything you said in terms of buying jobs. I think you don't want to create a crazy quilt of tax codes where one company making the same thing as another pays two different tax rates. This is crafted though in a way I think that was very limited and targeted, and will do the least amount of harm, and business community felt like they needed this to attract more investment in a hurry here. So,
all right, well, we'll see what Foxconn decides to do in the next couple of weeks. You know, finally tonight, the much talked about movie Detroit opens locally this weekend. The film premiered before an invitation-only audience at the Fox Theater this week. The movie depicts one of the tragic events during the 1967 rebellion in Detroit, the killings of 3 black teenagers at the Algiers Motel. The 3 white police officers charged in the case were acquitted. Detroit adds to the ongoing conversation about racism and the sad chapter in the city's history. But first of all, I want to kind of ask both of you. We've been living now in this last several weeks of everybody talking about 67, the coverage in the Detroit News, the Free Press. You guys live tweeted what it was like, or things that were happening 50 years ago on that day when it started. And I want to get from both of you your reaction to what people have been saying or talking about how 67's been covered 50 years later. And I'm going to start with you, Stephen.
Well, I mean, it's been covered a lot more extensively than any other anniversary I can remember. 10 years ago, we barely marked 40. 20 years ago at 30, I don't remember much of.
Actually, I actually was working at Channel 7 at the time, and I produced a 10-part series on the 30th anniversary.
See? So you were on it.
You should have drugged that out.
Well, you know, actually, I wasn't on camera at the time. I was a producer, so you had all these other Channel 7 anchors doing it. But yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I feel like there's some progress to note here in terms of the kinds of conversations we're able to have about what happened, why it happened, the run-up to things happening that way, and of course what's happened since. And there's been a sophistication to that I think we deserve some credit for. And that's not just media. I think lots of people have played a role in trying to shape that conversation around fact rather than myth. There have been so many things that we've told ourselves for so long about what happened in 67 and why that just weren't so. And I think we have moved away from those pretty substantially during this sort of reflective period.
What's been your reaction, Nolan?
I think the fear going in was that it would reopen old wounds and be, you know, exploitative. I think it was the coverage has been very enlightening, informative, and you think about most of the people who live in this community, black and white today, were either not alive or too young to remember 1967, and there's not been a great deal of, I mean, you wrote a column saying you didn't hear about it until you were like 10, 12 years old. And
6 or 7.
Yeah, whatever it was. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not been sort of part of our discussion, and you know, maybe that's good, but this was a seminal event in this region's history, not just Detroit, but Detroit and the suburbs. I mean, this was you look at this coverage and the old front pages now and the personal accounts from people, this was much a war as anything else right here in our community. And this was not, you know, a night or two of bottles thrown and windows broken like we've seen in recent years, you know, with some of the rioting. This was a full-scale, you know, revolt in this city, and I think it's good to be reminded of that and to look at the causes of that, and it sort of helps explain where we are today in the city. People look around the city and say, "Oh gosh, what happened to all these, you know, these neighborhoods and all these? Why do we have all these vacant places?" Well, you know, that's one reason, and you know, it's good history. It's always useful to know history, and I thought this was done well.
Yeah, and with the movie Detroit coming out, you know, people are always, whenever anything like this about Detroit, people brace themselves for, okay, what are people going to assume, and is it going to be good for Detroit's reputation to, you know, to be the story put on the big screen, and maybe some liberties here and there told with things, but what do you think this is going to mean for the city?
Well, I mean, this is I have not seen it, although I did do some early research work for the filmmakers. this is a really, my understanding, a wrapped account of one of the pivotal incidents of the '67 uprising. This incident at the Algiers Motel where police terrorized, literally terrorized, and I guess you see a lot of that on the screen, and it's very visceral. Black teens who they were supposedly accused of being snipers, turned out they weren't, and then ended up killing some of them. I hear it is a harrowing experience to watch, and I sort of worry about that. I don't like movies that are that graphic, but
you know, this
just
was
real quick, Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, this was as you said, a horrible event, as horrible as many of the things that happened down south, Emmett Till and what have you. These people were murdered. These young men were murdered, and yet we haven't really talked about it or you know, sort of marked it much over the last 50 years in this community.
Yeah. Those families never got even an apology from
it. It will be interesting to see how a national audience reacts to that. All right, gentlemen, it's always good to see you, and that's going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you back here next Thursday. Take care.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.